Hi, my name is Ruth Wheeler. I'm 73 years old. And you'd like to know about the toys I had when I was a child. I can't remember having many toys. It would mainly have been maybe teddies and dolls, and remember having a pair of roller skates. Simple things like skipping rope and balls. Used to have board games. The board games would have been things, snakes and ladders, Ludo, drafts. Other than that, I can't remember having many other toys. And all them years ago, because society was different then, we were allowed to play out in the street a lot, and I can remember playing out in the street from a very, very young, early age, mainly with skipping ropes, and you would have like 2 tennis balls where you would play these up against a brick wall, singing various songs to them. I was never allowed a bike until my mum and dad were quite strict, and they wouldn't let me have a bike until I was the age of 16. And of course, once I was 16, I wasn't then interested in having a 2-wheel bike. But what I can remember, they wouldn't let me have a bike because of safety on the roads, because we would ride in the roads, although there wasn't a lot of car traffic then. But I can remember all my friends had bikes, and I used to wear my roller skates and hang on to the back of their bikes, and they'd pull me along the street. And so that wasn't very safety conscious, was it? But my mum and dad, of course, didn't know that. Other than that, no, I remember once my sister, I was the youngest of 4 children. She was 20 years older than me, my sister, and she went off to Australia for 3 years, and she sent me back through the post a teddy, a koala bear. That's one thing I can remember very distinctly. And when my brother, who was in the army, he was 17 years older than me, he brought me home a lovely doll in a box, and I really loved that doll. But other than that, I can't really remember. Can't remember toys apart from what I've said, and maybe colouring books. I can remember growing up where we weren't one of the first to have a television on our street, but I would have only been 4 years old, and this stuck in my mind. It was the Queen Elizabeth II. It was her coronation in 1953. I don't know if it's what people have told me or that I can remember this, that we had a street party, and one of our neighbours, who were quite well off, they had this small black and white television set, and we all went into their house, crowded in their small living room, and watched the Queen's coronation. So I can remember that. But then a few years later we did get a TV, and the only programme on the telly for children was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it lasted 15 minutes. It was, I can remember 2 of the programmes. For very young children this was. There was something called Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, and that was puppets on a string, supposedly in a garden. And another one, which was puppets, was called, gosh, I can't remember what it was called. oh, it's cut. I can't remember what it was called. I remembered outside. What was it called? Oh, right, here we go. And the other one I can remember on another puppet one was called Andy Pandy, and that was a toy and a few other toys that came to life, and that was puppetry. Tell you, as I got a bit older, I can't really remember, because there wasn't a lot. It was, I was probably out playing with my friends in the street then, so I wasn't interested in coming in to watch TV. Films, the sort of programmes that was on the TV when I was young, I can't remember films. I really don't think they had films that would have been on at the cinema, that they repeated them on the TV. I just cannot remember. We had plays and the sort of normal TV that we have these days. There was one or two, might have been one or two quiz shows, and plays and the news. I remember once there was, I don't know how long it was on for, it was on every week. It was something called Quatermass. It was about aliens that their spaceship landed. I don't know if it was in London or Britain, somewhere it landed, and they were kind of trying to take over the world. And I can remember being really frightened of it and hiding behind the sofa in the front room when it was on. I wanted to watch it, but I was scared. And I can also remember, whilst this was on, if I needed to go to the bathroom, go to the toilet, I used to run up the stairs so quickly and run down again. I practically fell down the stairs because I was frightened that one of these aliens might come and get me. And that is the only recollection I can have of something that frightened me on the TV. In the cinema, from the age of when I went to children's cinema on a Saturday morning. Would I have been maybe about, oh gosh, how old would I have been? Maybe about 8 or 9. We used to go and queue up. There used to be all these children queuing up. And the cinema, in old money, if you went downstairs, it was 6pence, which is today's value of money is about 2.5p. And if you wanted the posh seats upstairs in the circle, that would be 9pence, which is about, oh gosh, about maybe about 4p. And I can remember that my mum and dad gave me, it was called a shilling. 1 shilling is about not even 5p. 1 shilling is not even 5p in today's money. And I would have enough money to go to the sweet shop and get some sweets beforehand. Then pay 6pence for the pictures, and then have money after the pictures to go and get a bag of chips from the way home. But I do remember once that when buying these sweets, my mum would always say to me, don't get bubble gum. She would never allow me to have bubble gum. But of course, as a child, what did I do? I got bubble gum. So there I am sitting in the cinema with this bubble gum, doing all this, taking it out of my mouth and putting it back again and chewing it. And then by the time I come out, I had all this bubble gum stuck over my fingers. I don't know what it was like, but it was so hard that I couldn't pick it off. And I can remember going home and my mum scrubbing my fingers with a brush and telling me, "Oh, I've told you that you're not allowed to have bubble gum." So that I can remember that from the pictures. But the type of films that we used to see, they were made especially for children. We would have two films. What kind of films were they? I can't remember. Some might have been like Cowboys and Indians, the old Western films. They would have been quite popular. And I suppose they were films about like child kind of films, maybe about children in their school days or what they might have done outside of that. I think I was too old to have the kind of the Laurel and Hardy type films. I think that was before my time, so to speak. But yeah, the pictures would last about 2 hours, and it was all Saturday morning pictures, and the children went on their own. I can't remember there being any adults there. No, I can't remember any adults at all. And every local town had these picture palaces. The one I used to go to, I lived in Dagenham, and it was in the shops in Dagenham. The actual building is still there, but now, of course, it's been converted into 2 shops. One of them's Iceland, and behind that, I think it may be a Lidl. So yeah, so if ever I go to Dagenham Heathway, I can walk past this shop, and it does remind me of my days when I was younger. Oh, and another thing talking about the cinema, Dagenham Heathway is a train station, so this cinema was on a hill. And I can remember on Sundays when it wasn't very busy, and me and my friends would roll down this hill on our roller skates and fall over and hurt ourselves many a time. And yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's about all I can remember about films when I was younger. Of course, it was all black and white, and there would have been a lot of booing and cheering from the children when there was a baddie. You'd boo the baddie, and then everyone would cheer the goodies. And I can't remember that there was ever any trouble there, when you think there would have been several hundred children all in the cinema at one time. And as far as I can remember, we was all fairly well behaved, not causing any problems. So yeah, that was happy times to have the freedom. We were lucky enough to have the freedom all that time ago, where it's a shame that the young children of today don't have that freedom. Shall I read books? Yes, we had books to read. It would have been things like I suppose Enid Blyton, the famous 5 books. Gosh, my memory's not very good, is it, for reading books? I must say that I wasn't a great reader. I didn't really keep reading up. I only really probably read when I had to. I don't remember whether school gave us books to read at home, but I did read, but not an awful lot. as I say, it would have been children's type books, which I can't remember apart from the famous five, Enid Blyton. Music. We only had a wireless, or people know it these days as a radio. So it would be what my parents would want to listen to on the radio. I can remember, I think it was on a Sunday afternoon. Now today this programme would be banned for what it's called, but it was called the Black and White Minstrel Show, because I do believe they had I think they had a show on the telly and the radio. Gosh, it's getting a bit confusing now, but I remember listening to the radio on a Sunday afternoon of songs of the decade that my parents liked, the 50s, and then it got into the 60s. I had a brother who was 10 years older than me, so he bought a record player and would buy records. He was into jazz. I didn't like jazz, but when I was a little bit older and I got pocket money, I was able to buy my own records. Of course, that was the era of pop, like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Cilla Black. There's endless. And of course there was also Elvis Presley and Cliff Richard. So when I had a little bit of pocket money, I was able to buy a record and play it on my brother's record player. But that wasn't till I was about 14, 15. When I was 15, I had a little Saturday job. I worked in Woolworths, so I had more money, for which I bought more records. But that was the time when I listened to music most of all, was from the age of about 14. Although sometimes, maybe from about the age of 13, we would go around one another's houses, a group of girls, like after school in the evening for a couple of hours, and that's when we would listen to music and dance and make lots of noise upstairs with the noise of the thumping on the ceiling, being told to keep the noise down. But I liked music, and I still do like music. Electronics, nothing at all, as I say. Radios, and then in the 50s it was a TV. I don't think there was any kitchen appliances that were electric until my brother bought a record player. I can't even remember if I had a hairdryer. They must have been out, but because I always had quite short hair. No, there wasn't a hairdryer in the house, so no, it was just a radio and TV and a record player. Hobbies. Oh gosh, hobbies. I can't. Now, there must have been things I collected. We didn't have things, I can't remember that we ever had, like when you bought a packet of sweets, you got these cards that you collected in a book, in a book. I think I did start a collection once. This sounds strange, but I think The only collection I might have started was because people used matches. They had boxes of matches. They would light their oven up and grill up with matches, and you would get different pictures on the front of box of matches. And I think I used to collect the fronts of boxes of matches. That was a kind of a hobby. My mother taught me to knit, so I probably knitted a few things for myself, like scarves, and may have tried to have knitted a blanket for my dolls. Something else called French knitting. I think it was called French knitting, where you had a cotton reel and had four nails on it, and you used to wind wool around. It just used to, at the other end of it, come this knitted line of circled wool. No. I used to think that I was helping out. I don't suppose it was really a hobby, but my dad had a hobby of making furniture, so I was always in his shed in the bottom of the garden doing a bit of polishing for him and things like that. Simple things where I couldn't hurt myself. I used to, don't suppose you really call this a hobby, but there is, at the bottom of my garden was a railway track. I mean, kind of used to watch all the trains go past. I never used to take down their numbers or anything like that. But no, apart from knitting, I can't remember if I made things, whether I made any artwork apart from the usual colouring of books, but no, that was about the extent of my hobbies: knitting and collecting matchboxes. Snacks and my mum used to make cakes, so that was we didn't buy shop cakes much. Mainly cakes. We didn't have all the snacks that you have today, like crisps. Can't remember. Might have had crisps in my early teens. Probably would have had crisps. They wouldn't have been. They weren't individual bags. There was one big bag. So it would be crisps and cakes that my mum made. Outfits, wow. In the summer, I can remember having 3 dresses. We didn't have school uniform. This is before the age of 11. And most of the time my sister used to make my dresses. So it was just a material called gingham, which was a small check. I remember having a yellow dress, a red one. There wasn't trousers. In the winter, I can't remember, it must have been thicker style dresses, and it used to be long grey socks. And that was about it. Can't ever remember wearing trousers for school, not in the juniors. Even when I went to the seniors, it still wasn't a school uniform. I wouldn't have had loads of clothes. I only had maybe 3 or 4 outfits that I used to change into, and I would have had one dress which would have been Sunday best, and that was it. And long socks until I was a young teenager. Then it was stockings. It wasn't tights. It was stockings. School, yes, school was school was okay. From a very early age, I used to, from about the age of 7, I'd take myself off to school. I lived the furthest away, so I used to knock for 2 or 3 friends on the way. And yeah, it was I used to enjoy it, except for the school dinners. They made you eat the school dinners, and everything was greens, mashed potatoes and kind of meat and gravy. And the only school dinner that I used to enjoy was on a Friday, because you knew it'd be fish and chips. In the in the infants and juniors, I can only remember your English and your maths and artwork and PE. And in the seniors you had the other subjects, including your science and geography and history. And I remember the last 2 years of when I was 14 and 15, I went to a school that was kind of a secretarial school, where you learn typewriting and shorthand. Then you went on to, when you left school, you went and worked in an office. There was no uniform, there was no school uniform. In some of the schools, the senior schools, because when you was 11 there was an exam called the 11 Plus, where some children, the better, the cleverer children went to the high schools. They were the ones that would have had the uniform, but the secondary schools that I went to, you didn't have to wear school uniform. Birthdays, wow. Can't remember. I don't think we made any big deal of it. I can't remember going out at all for any of my birthdays. No. I mean, it would have been celebrated with a card and a few presents and maybe a little tea party indoors, but that's the that would have been all that it would have been, a tea party indoors. I had a happy childhood. I had good parents, and sometimes I remember the only bad thing, well, not bad thing, but the only thing I can remember when I was about 11, 12 maybe, because my parents were quite a lot older than me. I used to get the mickey taken out of me a lot. Oh, they're old, they must be your grandparents, they're not your parents. But I soon got over that, but I can remember not liking that much. But other than that, I had a happy childhood. Oh, thank you for this interview, Theo. I quite enjoyed it.